Welcome to Ryan's Running Reviews in partnership with Roadrunner Sports, and today we're taking a look at one of New Balance's fastest running shoes. It's the SC Elite V3. Let's run with it. Now, before we get started, I do want to say these shoes were provided to me by Roadrunner Sports. However, no one had a chance to preview this video, and this file synopsis is my own. I also like to say, please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing. Here we go. And one other thing, I am just getting over a cold, so if my voice sounds a little bit rough, that is why, so I appreciate you guys understanding. Let's do this. The SC Elite V3 is New Balance's premier super shoe, designed for race day all the way up to the marathon distance. It also falls under the SuperComp line. That's what the SC stands for. They have the SuperComp Pacer, which is a lightweight, very quick, nimble shoe designed for those shorter distances. Then you have the SuperComp Trainer, which is an illegal stack height. It's like an Ultra Max cushion shoe designed for training. And then we have the SC Elite V3, which is their marathon super shoe, if you will. So it kind of falls into the SuperComp line. They have a different variety of their shoes, kind of pick the stack height and kind of style you want with the FuelCell foam and the carbon fiber plate. And I believe they also have a track spike line with the SuperComp name, but that we'll save that for a whole different separate category. So we're taking a look at New Balance's key super shoe here. I'm excited to dig into it. This shoe costs $230 and weighs 8.1 ounces, which is slightly heavy for a super race day shoe. We do get a different drop this year. We have 40 millimeters in the heel, 36 in the forefoot forward, and updated 4 millimeter drop, giving us a little bit more foam under the forefoot. Moving on to the upper, we have a very breathable experience here. It's a very minimal setup as well. It's an engineered knit-like material. You can see directly into it. It has these large holes that allow for excellent ventilation. Now, this is going to be on the more snug side of things because it is a race day shoe. However, I did find it to fit true to size. There's also quite a bit of substantial plastic overlays on the lateral and top part of the upper. It's basically the New Balance branding. Gives the upper just a tad bit more structure, in addition to the very substantial toe guard, which is very supportive towards the front part of the shoe, so you won't have it collapsing down in on your toes. I found that to be quite helpful. The other interesting thing is the tongue, which is integrated directly into the upper. It's a stretch knit material, very elastic, and again, is directly integrated into the upper, providing a very seamless, consistent feel. Now, knit stretch tongues are a little bit controversial. When I've run into them in the past, I'm not a huge fan, mainly because if you have to pull down the laces to get a very secure fit, it tends to bunch up and not be the most comfortable thing ever. That wasn't the case here. My foot shape worked very well for basically the preset fit of this tongue, and I think it worked quite well. Kept the lace pressure off to a moderate degree. Maybe I wish I had a little bit more padding, but I think it's more of a minor gripe. So if your foot is on the more average side of things, I think this will work quite well for you. If you have a more narrow foot and you need to kind of pull the laces a little bit more tightly down, you might have a little bit of bunching. Knit stretch tongues aren't always my favorite, but I think the implementation here was quite good. You also have a pull tab towards the top of the tongue, which you will need because the opening of this shoe is rather small, and if you have a wider foot or even an average foot, honestly, it's a little bit of a struggle to get your foot in the shoe. But once you're in, and the lockdown is quite superb. But I will say getting your foot into the shoe is a bit of a process. Moving to the back of the shoe, you do have a pull tab, which you will probably need because it does take a little bit of effort, like we just talked about, to get your foot into the shoe. The heel counter is on the more minimal side of things, which is to be expected for a race day shoe, but it becomes a little bit more substantial as you move down towards the base. I found the heel lock to be quite superb, and I think it works quite well here. The lockdown fit through and through I thought was quite impressive. One other thing I do want to point out about the upper, while it did have a very comfortable feel, there was one small irritation point, and that point was right here, kind of where the tongue meets the upper. Basically, it just had a little bit too much of an aggressive cut to it, and my ankle had some rubbing, so I would make sure to wear the right socks. And I think because this is a more narrow opening, it just cut a little bit too close to my ankle. Once I adjusted my sock and kind of got things situated, it worked out well, but it was a little bit aggressive. I did have a little bit of irritation with my ankle towards the front part of the shoe, just kind of right here where I'm pointing. Moving on to the midsole, we do have FuelCell foam, which is New Balance's softest, lightest, and most energetic. They use FuelCell on a wide variety of their shoes and their models. However, this implementation is definitely the bounciest and most energetic that I've seen. It's also an interesting implementation. There's some things to this shoe that aren't that obvious to the naked eye. The first thing is it's a dual density setup. So the top layer of FuelCell foam is going to be slightly firmer, and then the bottom layer of FuelCell foam below the carbon fiber plate is going to be slightly softer. So it's both FuelCell, just to different degrees of firmness. The overall experience is incredibly soft and energetic, but it did use this dual density setup to give you a little bit more stability and give you a slightly different sensation as you use this shoe. The other interesting thing is the carbon fiber plate. So you can see it right here. They have the Energy Arc branding on it. And essentially this plate isn't perfectly flat. It has a little bit of a curve to it. And according to New Balance, this does help with the efficiency. So this plate goes from the top where your heel is and then swoops down closer to the ground. And then on top of that, with that swooping S shape, the plate has a little bit of a curve to it, giving it some additional efficiency, at least according to New Balance. I would love to see those numbers. I'd love to see the science behind it, but I'm sure they have that locked behind a secret vault somewhere. But nonetheless, that plate does a great job of stiffening up the shoe. You have a little bit of bend towards the forefoot. It's not the stiffest plated shoe I've ever had, but I think it does a great job of helping you notice that rocker geometry, which is very aggressive here. As far as my experience goes, I really appreciate the fact that you can really feel the FuelCell liveliness under the forefoot. They changed this to a 4mm drop, giving us a little bit more foam through the forefoot. So I think that actually paid off, and it is very noticeable. A lot of times with like super shoes or some of the more fun shoes, you only get that cool sensation at the heel and midfoot, which makes sense because that's where most of the foam is. But I think the forefoot really does shine through, representing FuelCell well. So if you're a forefoot striker, I think you will be happy. I'll also say this is a very soft shoe. It's not the most stable super shoe out there. So if you want or need stability, you might want to kind of be careful or go in a different direction. But if for someone who wants a soft, bouncy, and fun, energetic ride, I think this will work well for you, especially because they kind of carved out this middle section. The big reason for that is once you land, it's supposed to splay out and give you a little bit more energy and pop and kind of let your foot sink a little bit further. And I think that is very much the case here. And that plate does an excellent job of helping you notice the rocker geometry, pairing very much well with the bouncy, lively FuelCell foam. Moving on to the outsole, you have a decent amount of rubber coverage, most of that through the forefoot. They have this purple section in the middle to protect the carbon fiber plate once you roll through the forefoot section. The heel area is a little bit more pared down. The lateral side on the heel section does have a bit more rubber for added durability, and I found the grip to work quite well. It's a race day shoe, so it's not the deepest lugs ever, but I think it worked quite well on the road, and I didn't have any major complaints. So overall, I think the SC Elite V3 works quite well. It's a very fun shoe to run in. My only minor gripes are that you had some irritation towards the front of the shoe, basically where the upper meets the tongue. It's a little bit bulky and just kind of messes with your ankle just a bit. If you adjust your socks and get everything situated correctly, it goes away, but it's just annoying to have to do that every time you put on the shoe. The other thing I'll say is it's a very narrow opening, so sliding your foot into the shoe does take a good bit of work, and if you have a larger foot, may be an issue. I'll also say it comes in at 8.1 ounces, making it a slightly heavy race day option compared to some of its competitors. And the stretch knit tongue, while it worked well for me, isn't always ideal for customization. Basically, if you have a different shaped foot or if you want a better secure fit, it might not work because you have to kind of scrunch the knit tongue, which just isn't my favorite. So it worked well for me. I was happy for that, but it might not be optimal for all runners. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed my time with this. The FuelCell foam is incredibly bouncy. I think the dual density setup works quite well, and the plate helps accentuate that rocker geometry. It flows along very nicely. I think fans of the RC Elite V2 will like the S3 or the V3. I'm getting all my words mixed up here. But yeah, it's just a fun light shoe, and this thing is just enjoyable to run in. So let me know down in the comments what you think of New Balance's latest super shoe. Are you going to pick it up, or are you going to go for the illegal stack height SC trainer with that massive midsole? I'd love to hear from you. Well, I'm Ryan from Ryan's Running Reviews, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.